Let's talk about the 2008 Farm Bill. Now, there was some political drama associated with the 2008 Farm Bill. So as you know, farm bills are on a timer. They expire. Most of them last 4 to 5 years. So we should have had a farm bill passed well before 2008. 2008 minus 2002 is 6. We're past due for a farm bill. And what happened was, for political reasons, things were going on that were more important than negotiating a farm bill. So Congress didn't bother passing the next farm bill. They extended the 2002 Farm Bill twice before they got around to creating a farm bill in 2008. And had they not done that, the extensions would have expired and we would have rolled back to our permanent legislation. And that wasn't the only political drama surrounding the 2008 Farm Bill. The 2008 Farm Bill was passed by both houses. And the president at the time, the second Bush, thought that the Farm Bill was too expensive and he didn't like all the expensive commodity subsidies and provisions in the Farm Bill, and he wanted to get rid of them, and so he vetoed the Farm Bill. And as you probably know, Congress can override a veto, and so it went back to Congress and they overrode the veto. And then someone started actually flipping through the Farm Bill to see what was in it, and they found out that someone left an entire chapter out of the Farm Bill. The trade title wasn't in the Farm Bill. Now, what you got to remember is that the Farm Bill that was passed into law, was the Farm Bill. So the Farm Bill didn't have the trade title. It was gone. It was missing. A second version of the Farm Bill with the trade title in where it belongs had to go up before Congress and pass. And it went to the president, who vetoed it a second time. So the 2008 Farm Bill was actually vetoed twice. And then Congress overrode that veto. And that's kind of interesting that the Farm Bill can get overridden twice. Now, what you've got to remember is that a lot of this really truly is political drama. Not passing a farm bill would be stupid, because if you don't pass a farm bill, you revert back to permanent legislation, and the permanent legislation is, well, it's just pretty bad policy because it's expensive, 2, it creates lots of deadweight loss, and these new policies that tend to switch to decoupled direct payments are just better policies from an efficiency and a cost standpoint, and they're consistent with the WTO agreements that we signed up for, whereas the old subsidy system from back in the 1940s would have definitely been something that would have distorted trade and not been kosher with the WTO. So Bush probably knew that it would get overridden, and the veto was probably more of a political statement, and that's just me doing political analysis. I really don't know what Bush was thinking when he did that. I didn't ask him. Not that I'd be in a position to ask a president why they did whatever they did, but that's what happened back then, in case you're ever kind of curious about how the 2008 Farm Bill played out. Let's talk about insurance. As you know from previous videos, crop insurance has been gaining traction in these farm bills, and the price that a farmer pays for insurance has been gradually dropping as we subsidize the crop insurance. But also what you've got to keep in mind is that the political will to subsidize agriculture has been declining. And one of the reasons is because farm income, go back into the 40s and 50s and 60s, farm income and incomes in rural areas were less than incomes in urban areas. The rich folks lived in town and the poor folks lived in the country. So it's really no longer politically viable to subsidize rural incomes through the Farm Bill. But what is still true is that farming is still risky. Some years have high prices, some years have low prices. Some years you've got great yields, some years you have terrible yields. So the wording of the policies in the Farm Bill has morphed. It's morphed from non-recourse marketing loans into counter-cyclical payments into this concept called the ACRE program. So the CCP, the counter-cyclical program payment, became ACRE, ACRE. ACRE is average crop revenue election. And this is revenue replacement. So what's happened here is we've moved to a policy that on the surface reads more like an insurance product, where you're insuring the farmer against financial losses. And I got a quote here. This quote, I don't know who these people were, from 2008. The current marketing loan and counter-cyclical programs provide little protection when yields are low. So if we're worried about farm income and yields have plummeted for whatever reason, a drought or floods or whatever the case may be, it did little to protect the farmer. It only protected the farmer when prices were low. And continuing on with their quote, farmers can receive marketing loan and counter-cyclical payments even when revenue is above average because high yields offset low prices. Here's what we mean by that. We have a name for this in agriculture. We call it the natural hedge. If you've taken Ag Business 4130, you've learned about hedging. I've taught that class in the past to colleagues teaching it currently as I'm watching this video. Hedging is a real important thing that happens in agriculture, and we have this thing that happens called the natural hedge. So basically what you want to imagine we've had a nationwide drought. If we have a nationwide drought, prices will go up, thereby somewhat offsetting the low yields with high prices. Now, if we have really great yields, with really high yields, prices will come down. And so there's this natural risk protection built into the system so that your good yield in a good year is going to protect you from the low price that happens during that good year. And that is the essence of the argument in that quote that I just made. Farmers cannot benefit from programs during a drought because during a drought, prices are high. But when they really need income protection is during the drought because their yield collapses during a drought. And so it doesn't matter that prices are high during a drought because you don't have any corn to sell because there's a drought. But in a good year, they benefit from fantastic yield and they can cash in on a CCP payment because when the yields are high, the price is low. That's just the way it works. And so the argument here is that farmers already have the natural hedge in place, and the program doesn't actually do much good during the years where the farmers actually need the help when they've had a crop failure. And that's kind of the rationale, logic, and intuition of these new policies, this ACRE program. So let's talk a little bit more about the ACRE program. ACRE stands for Average Crop Revenue Election. And it replaced the counter-cyclical program payments. And so farmers were allowed to choose between ACRE or CCP. They got the choice. They could pick one. And again, there's a bunch of math they've got to do to figure out which one's the best policy for them. And this was all the rage back in 08, 09, 10, trying to give advice to farmers on which one they should choose. And a lot of ag economists basically had jobs because they had to develop spreadsheets and calculators they could pass out to farmers so the farmers can make that choice. The logic of the ACRE program is that it is revenue protection. And it's not price protection, it's revenue protection. So the ACRE payments can kick in if you have a drought or if you have low prices. You need the revenue to fall below a threshold for the ACRE to kick in. So again, it's more like revenue insurance. It ensures you're going to have a certain level of revenue, whereas the CCP program just kicks in based on what prices do. So CCP was triggered by a seasonal national average crop price falling below a target price because it's just a target price with a deficiency payment. ACRE payments are triggered when there's a shortfall in the average revenue in the state and individual farm revenue. So that and is important. So the state you're in has to have a big event that causes revenue to dip, and you have to have the same problem as the farmers in your state. So you've got a revenue dip in your state and on your farm. And if the state level revenue falls below the threshold and your farm revenue falls below the threshold, you would get your ACRE payment. And keeping with the theme, in the 2002 Farm Bill, we get a complicated formula. So the first set of formulas here, this is the AND formula for your ACRE payment. You basically have to have, the first formula is a state level guarantee, and the bottom formula is your farm level guarantee, and you have to have an and. Both of the formulas have to be true. Now, I'm not going to go through the formula in great detail because this was the 2008 Farm Bill, and we've got a whole new formula for the most recent Farm Bill. So there's really no point in learning this formula, but what I do want you to remember is there's a formula for the state level, there's a formula for your farm level. Both have to fall below a certain level before you get a payment if you're on the ACRE program. And that's just the formula for determining if you get a payment. There's also a complicated formula to use to determine what your payment is. And so there it is. If you just want to hit pause and look at it or flip through the textbook and look at it, you're welcome to do so. But again, I don't have any expectation that you would memorize this formula, because at this point it's history. This farm bill's long gone and no longer the law of the land, so memorizing is not necessary. The important thing for you, though, is to understand that we went from 1996 with direct payments to 2002, where we brought back target prices with deficiency payments and called them counter-cyclical payments, right? Counter-cyclical program payments. And from there, we moved to the acre program, right? The policy is morphing and the language of the policy is changing to keep up with the times. A couple of other things that's in the Farm Bill that I want to point out to you that's relevant, you need to know about. First of all, in 08, the crop insurance program is still there, and it's getting to be a bigger subsidy and a better deal for the farmer. And the other thing that's important, this is in the 02 Farm Bill as well. I'm not sure why the book didn't bring it up when they talked about the 02 Farm Bill, is a thing called COOL. COOL stands for Country of Origin Labeling. Country of Origin Labeling. COOL is a trade policy. Country of origin labeling requires, it's primarily on meat products. I haven't read the policy in great detail, but if you were going to a grocery store and pick up a package of food and flip it over and take a look at the back, it'll tell you where it came from. So COOL, country of origin labeling, has been around since the early 2000s. And the country of origin labeling is a little bit controversial. It's presented to us as consumers as a way for us consumers to get knowledge and information about food quality and food safety. The implication being that food from somewhere else is inherently less safe than food from here. Ergo, when you see the label and you see a country that maybe you don't trust, you put it down, you pick up the next package and see if it has a Made in the USA label on it. So the question then becomes, is this a trade distorting policy? Is this basically what we would call a non-tariff trade barrier? Is this a trade barrier that's set up so that the consumer picks up the food packages, looks at the label and says no thanks, puts the food down, and now a lot of good importing food from whatever country you want to talk about, and whatever country you might imagine is not safe to import food from or is perceived to not be safe. If the consumer perceives it's not safe, the consumer doesn't buy it. So we end up in a situation where no food company would bring food in from that country, in essence creating a trade barrier. But it's not a tariff, not a tax. It's a non-tariff trade barrier. And it just brings up so many questions. For example, does the consumer have the right to know where their food came from? A lot of people would argue, yes, consumers have a right to know where their food came from. Okay, but if that label makes you believe the food is unsafe and therefore creates a trade barrier where one might not be needed or really isn't justifiable, then is it fair to require country of origin labeling on our food? I'm going to leave you with that and let you just kind of think about that trade-off between what is a fair way to trade with other countries and what is a fair way to make sure consumers have information they need to make decisions. And what you got to remember is a lot of trade barriers on the surface look like they're there to do something good, like help the consumer. But at the end of the day, a lot of trade barriers are just trade barriers and nothing else. All right, I'll let you catch the next video. Thanks for watching.